Good morning. Today I am going to talk about an overview of English Honors undergraduate syllabus. I am preparing this video in order to answer certain queries raised by mostly the new students, new undergraduate students, new students who have joined English Honors courses in different colleges. And many of them has asked me, sir, what is the syllabus, what is the overview, how can we understand what is there in the syllabus, and how should we approach all the things which is very new to us, which are very new to us. So in this particular lecture I am not going to talk about any specific topic. Rather, I would try to project an overall idea of what are the things which are to be studied in the course of English Honors curriculum. Okay, so let us move to the first year. In the first year, we usually have two papers. In the first paper, we have the history of English language and literature. Now, this history is different from the history which we have already read. Earlier, we have read about the history of certain kings, certain time period, certain places, the regular history which we have learned in our matriculations or inter examinations, intercurriculums. But in the first year of English Honors, we have the history of English literature. In this particular part, we study how the literature, especially the English literature, has evolved in the course of time. In this particular part, we have Old English poetry, we have Middle English poetry, we have Elizabethan lyrics and sonnets, we have metaphysical poetry, cavalier poetry, 18th century poetry. Now, if we follow all the subtitles here, sub themes here, you can see that all these poetry types of poetry, or the types of plays, or the types of other aspects like dramas or novels or prose, how these those particular genre have developed in the course of time. Old English poetry, we talk about in Old English poetry we talk about the early development of English poetry in the first half of the first century, fourth or fifth century. During that period, how how the things were written in archaic English and all. And with the gradual development of time, suppose Middle English poetry or Elizabethan lyrics. Middle English poetry is chiefly in 12th century or 13th century or 14th century, and after that we have the time of Chaucer. Then we have the Elizabethan poetries. Then there is metaphysical poetry. So all these sub things which is been put under history of poetry and individual poets, you can see it is also a kind of historical development. With passing time, the types or the genres changes. In the second part, we have the history of drama. In that, okay, before I go to the second part, there are certain major poets, major English writers which you have never heard of. Maybe, I mean, the new students perhaps have never heard of these names, or some of you have heard some of the names like Shakespeare's. So we have important poets like Geoffrey Chaucer, John Milton, John Donne, then John Dryden, Alexander Pope, William Wordsworth, Coleridge. Perhaps you have heard of Wordsworth. So all the important poets of English literature have to study in this particular part. In the second part, we have the history of drama, how drama has originated, during the time of Middle English period, how it has evolved through mystery, miracle, or morality plays, and how it actually got developed in the course of time. So in this particular part we study the history of the development of drama. In the third part we have history of novel and prose. So first part is all about poetry, second part is all about drama, and in the third part we have the history of novel and prose and how those things have evolved in the course of time in history of English literature. Okay, so this is the paper 1. I have some other things in the paper 1. We have there are certain objective questions that can also be asked, and all the marks divisions are also there in the PowerPoint. You can follow the marks divisions. In the second section of this particular paper we have history of English language, which is also very important. How language has evolved in the course of time, and what are the other influences which has actually instigated in the development of the language. These things we have to study in this particular section. Here we have the features of various time period of language. For example, we have the Old English languages. We have there are certain laws like Grimm's laws and Verner's laws. So in the Old English period, in the Middle English period, and in how the modern English vocabulary has been enriched through the development and origin of language, all these things are to be studied in this particular section of paper 1. Okay, so apart from this we have certain short questions, and the structure of the questions are again here, and you can follow the PowerPoint once again. And apart from that, we have provided certain books, certain recommended books which can be followed for the first year part 1 paper 1 students. The lists are here, you can follow the PowerPoint once again. So let us move to the second paper. Second paper is all about poetry from Chaucer to Arnold. So this particular paper is about the poetry. In this particular paper we have covered several poems of various time period. Let us go into that, and there is one book prescribed for this particular group of poetries. This is Mystic Drum, which was edited by Vilas Salonque and published through by Orient Longman Publications. So here we have various poetry from Chaucer to Arnold. Just remember, Chaucer is towards the end of the Middle English period. Geoffrey Chaucer, he was a famous English writer, English poet, and Matthew Arnold is from Victorian poetry. Victorian poetry is as late as 19th century. So in this particular paper we have like 400-500 years of poetry. I mean the poetry from various time period of these 500 years have been put into the syllabus, and we have to study all those things. So we have in this particular paper certain forms of poetry like sonnet. Sonnet is very important. Sonnet, 14-line poems, and they are different. So important sonnetiers like Edmund Spenser or William Shakespeare. Then we have epic. Epic is another long form of poetry. Those who want to know about epic and sonnets, you people can follow my earlier lectures which has been covered. And then there is metaphysical poetry. I have talked about metaphysical poetry in another talk by John Donne. So you can see all the poems from various time period has been put in this second paper. And there are other poems. There are certain precursor of romantic poems or some romantic poems, and there are incidentally there are some modern poems and Victorian poems as well. So this particular paper covers an extensively covers various parts of uh, the poems, and apart from that we have a very important poem which is a form of a booklet. It is called The Rape of the Lock. It is an example of a mock epic, and regarding that I had put a lecture earlier also. I have put a lecture. So, and apart from that we have another poem, that is The Scholar Gypsy. So in the first section we have 20 poems uh, which you can study from that particular book, or you can download it one by one from internet. All the poems are available on the internet, and you have to buy these two books, The Rape of the Lock and Scholar Gypsy, for further study. And the marks divisions and other things are given on the PowerPoint. You can follow that. Okay, so let us move to the second year. Second year students are to study drama. Drama is very important thing, and this particular paper 3 is from drama, and it is titled as Drama from Marlowe to Wilde. In this particular paper we have 4 plays, 2 by William Shakespeare, 1 by William Congreve, and another by Oscar Wilde. So we have 2 plays. One is Macbeth by William Shakespeare. Macbeth is a tragic play, and another play is there, comedy, which is Twelfth Night. Okay, so the 2 plays by Shakespeare is there. The 2 plays by Shakespeare are there, and apart from that we have a comedy of manner by William Congreve, Love for Love, and there is another comedy, very hilarious comedy. You will whenever you read the text you will enjoy it a lot, I can guarantee that. It's The Importance of Being Earnest. So these are the only 4 plays in the second year, for the second year students, in the paper 3. Okay, for the second year students in paper 4 it is all about prose. Prose is something which is different from poetry and drama, and prose also includes the novels. So here you have to read 3 novels. Pride and Prejudice is a classical novel by Jane Austen, which was written in the transition period of Romantic and Victorian period. And then there is The Mayor of Casterbridge, which was written by Thomas Hardy. It's another classic, English classic novel. And an American novel by Ernest Hemingway, which is titled as The Old Man and the Sea. So these 3 novels are there, and there are 8 prose. There are 8 prose kind of essays. Those things are there, and those essays can be found in the book English Prose Down the Ages, edited M. Williams. Okay, so this particular book, if you buy this particular book, you can find all the 8 essays, life and death by from the authorized version of the Bible. Then there is Of Studies by Francis Bacon, Giant Despair by John Bunyan, The Character of Alexander Pope by Samuel Johnson, The Age of Chivalry is Gone by Edmund Burke, Christ Hospital by Charles Lamb, Dante and Shakespeare by Thomas Carlyle, and Ecstatic Experience by Walter Pater. So you have 8 essays to read and 3 novels to read in this particular paper. Okay, so the marks divisions and other things, and apart from that you have to study certain terms related to prose. For example, plot, story, character, setting, point of view. From those terms you will have to attend for like 5 marks questions, 5 marks questions. Those things are the literary terms related to the prose. And regarding on that particular topic, I have also presented another presentation earlier. You can follow my earlier lectures. Okay, so let us move to the third year students. In the third year students, for the study year students, we have paper 5, which is meant for there are three essays, three modern essays. One is tradition and individual talent, the function of criticism, and the frontiers of criticism. So this particular paper is all about the criticism. Oh, the section A is all about the earlier literary criticism, and the students are to be introduced to certain important writers of certain important literary critics like Philip Sidney, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, I.A. Richards, Herbert Reed, Walter Pater, and Jacques Derrida. So you have to understand all the literary critics and the criticism writers. And in the second part of this particular paper, you have to study several essays, critical essays. They have three essays I have already mentioned, and apart from that, in the second section we have four more essays, six more essays. The names are already here. The critics of those essays are Dryden's, Matthew Arnold, then there is Shakespeare, David Deutsch. You can follow the second. And third part is very interesting. Third part of the fifth paper is like you have to critically appreciate either a short poem or a short extract from a long poem and one short prose passage. And all the recommended books are mentioned in this particular section, and the marks division is also there. So let us move to the sixth paper. Sixth paper is titled as Modern Literature. Okay, so this particular part we have to study several poems. We have 20 modern poems. Earlier we have read Victorian poems or romantic poems or metaphysical poetry in the first paper, first year. In the second paper, now we have to study modern poems. Modern poems means the poems written in 20th century and later. So all the important modern poets like Eliot, W.B. Yeats, Wilfred Owen, W.H. Auden, Robert Graves, Stephen Spender, Dylan Thomas, all those poets, important poets of English literature have to be studied. Okay, and apart from that, in the modern literature paper we have a drama called Candida. It's written by George Bernard Shaw, and you have to study about this particular drama as well. And there are certain proses, there are certain selected proses also from this paper, which can be studied from the book selection from E.M. Foster's book Passage to India. Okay, so you have the Passage to India novel also. So this particular paper has all the aspects. First part have the poems, second part is the drama, third part is the prose, and fourth part is the novel. So the marks divisions and the detail of the books can be seen on the PowerPoint. So let us move to the third paper, seventh paper of third year students, for the study students. In this particular paper we have Indian English literature. Earlier we have studied English literature, British English literature. Now we have Indian English literature. So in this particular paper we will study all the pre and post independent poetry, especially the poetry. There is a book called An Anthology of Indian English Poetry, okay, published by Orient Longman. There you can find all the poetry mentioned here. The poetries are by several Indian English authors like Toru Dutt, Rabindranath Tagore, there is Sarojini Naidu, Rishi Arabindra, Nizam Ezekiel, and Kamla Das. So this particular part has to be studied from the perspective of the all the Indian English poetry. And apart from that, there are certain section of the prose. Certain section of the prose, those are also there in this particular paper. There are certain prose written by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi or Swami Vivekananda, those things also are needed to be read. And apart from that, then there is the short story collections by Rabindranath Tagore, Mulk Rajanand and Bhavani Bhattacharya. And apart from that, we have another novel, Waiting for the Mahatma by R.K. Narayan. So this particular paper also carries several aspects by the Indian English writers. First part covers the poems, second part covers the prose, third part covers the short stories, and fourth part covers the novels. So this is all about the Indian English literature. Apart from that, you have a special paper, and there are 3 papers from which you have to select any one. First one is American literature, second one is linguistics, and third one is the 19th century fiction. You have to select any one of them for your 8th paper. So if you select the American literature, you have to study the following things. So in the first section of this paper, you have to select the history, you have to study the history of American literature. There are several things like several important writers, just like British literature, the history of English literature, we have history of American literature, and there you will be acquainted with several important American writers like Henry David Thoreau, Waldo Emerson, many Nobel laureates like Ernest Hemingway or William Faulkner. Then there is Henry James, Emily Dickinson, Theodore Dreiser, Robert Frost. So all the poets and the novelists and the writers, critics, you have to study in this particular first part. And the books are also mentioned here. And you have to study about the anthology of American poetry and anthology of American short story, American novel, American drama, everything. Apart from that, you have to study poetry, certain American poetry, and the books prescribed for the collection of the poetry is The Birds Sublime. Here you have important American poets like Emily Dickinson, Claude McKay, Robert Frost, Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, William Carlos Williams, E. Cummings, Sylvia Plath, Robert Lowell. All the important American poets have to be studied from this particular part. In the second part, there are short stories from American writers, by American writers, important American writers like Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne. Then there is Mark Twain, Stephen Crane, and apart from that, students have to read uh, the writers of Walden, writers like Henry David Thoreau, who has written Walden. So you have to read about Walden as well. And in the third section, you have a novel by Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea, which you have already studied in the second year. So if you take this particular paper, you have to read the novel again. Okay. So the second paper which you can choose from the 3 as your special paper is the linguistics. In the linguistics paper, you have to study about linguistics, how subject matter and scopes, all the definitions of linguistics, and then the section 2 you have phonetics and phonology, all the important terms and how phonetics and phonology influences our speech and all. Then third section belongs is from the phonemic transcription. So this particular paper talks about, and the fourth section is there, it's about morphology, which defines the words, and the fifth section is syntax and grammar. So this entire paper is from the linguistics, and the students who are inclined to linguistics can choose this paper as their special papers. So let us move to the last paper which can be chosen as your special paper. This particular paper is titled as 19th century fiction. Here in the first section, you have to study the history of 19th century English fictions, important novels, how the history of 19th century fiction has evolved. All these things you have to study. And there are several novels in this particular paper. For example, George Eliot, Silas Mariner, Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities, Emily Bronte, classic, Wuthering Heights, Henry James, American writer, his Ambassador, Thomas Hardy's The Taste of D'Urbervilles, and American writer Nathaniel Hawthorne's Scarlet Letter. So, if you study 19th century fiction, you have to study both British novelists as well as the American novelists. In the second section, there is a collection of short stories. So, there are many short stories from both American writers and by the British writers. For example, there are short stories like Mark Twain or Robert Louis Stevenson. Then there is Oscar Wilde. So, Anton Chekhov. Okay, all these short stories can also be read in this paper. And in the fourth section, we have objective type questions which can be asked from the entire syllabus. So, this is all about the 19th century's fiction, and this is all about the syllabus. So, you can take a look at it, and if you have any queries, if you have any questions regarding the English honors syllabus, you can ask me about those queries in the comment section. Thank you.